Every person you have ever envied for their popularity has, at some point, felt completely alone in a room full of people who adore them. Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympic athlete in history, surrounded by coaches, teammates, sponsors, and millions of fans worldwide, described a loneliness so deep it nearly destroyed him. He had everything the world tells you should make loneliness impossible, and none of it mattered. This is not a story about sad people who need more friends. This is a detective story about a signal your brain is sending you, and why almost everything you believe about that signal is wrong. Let us start with a fact that breaks the common theory. Loneliness has almost nothing to do with how many people are around you. Researchers John Cacioppo and William Patrick spent decades studying this at the University of Chicago, and their conclusion, published in their landmark 2008 work, was sharp and uncomfortable. You can feel desperately lonely at a crowded dinner table. You can feel perfectly connected while sitting alone in a quiet room with a book and a cup of tea growing cold beside you. The variable that matters is not quantity. It is not the number of names in your phone or the number of people at your birthday party. It is something else entirely, and we will get to it. But not yet. First, imagine someone standing in the center of a vast open plaza. Dozens of people move around them in smooth, looping paths, each one close enough to touch. The person in the center turns slowly, watching them pass. None of them stop. None of them make eye contact. The crowd flows like water around a stone, and the stone feels every drop that does not pause. Now picture a different scene entirely. A single person sits on the edge of a cliff, legs hanging over a canyon filled with soft blue light from the sky above. There is no one else visible for miles. Wind moves through the grass behind them, and yet this person is calm, settled, almost radiating warmth from within. Two scenes, two opposite arrangements of people. The emotional math does not work the way you would expect. Something is operating beneath the surface here. Something older than language, older than cities, older than the idea of friendship itself. And the first clue is hunger. Not metaphorical hunger, actual, physical, gnawing hunger. Cacioppo and Patrick propose that loneliness functions as a biological alarm signal, nearly identical in its mechanics to hunger or thirst. When your body needs water, it does not politely suggest you find a glass. It screams. It makes your mouth dry, your head ache, your thoughts narrow until the only thing that matters is finding something to drink. You do not choose to feel thirsty. Your body decides for you. Loneliness operates on the same principle. It is your brain detecting a threat to your social survival and pulling every lever it can to make you fix the problem. Deep inside the brain, in regions that evolved long before humans had words for what they were feeling, a signal fires. That signal is not a flaw. It is not weakness. It is not evidence that you are too needy or too sensitive. It is a system doing exactly what it was designed to do millions of years ago, when being separated from your group meant death. Think about that for a moment. For most of human history, isolation was not a lifestyle choice. It was a death sentence. A human alone on the savannah had no one to watch for predators while they slept, no one to share food during a famine, no one to help raise children who took years to become self-sufficient. The ones who felt a painful urge to reconnect when they drifted too far from the group survived. The ones who felt nothing did not. We are all descendants of the ones who felt the pain. This matters enormously because most people treat loneliness as a personal failure. They think it means they are unlikable, broken, socially defective, or too needy. But loneliness is no more a character flaw than thirst is a character flaw. It is information, pure, urgent, ancient information. And if you have ever felt it sharply and wondered what was wrong with you, nothing was wrong with you. Your alarm system was working. But here is where the detective story gets complicated. What happens when an alarm keeps ringing and you cannot figure out how to turn it off? Imagine zooming into a microscopic landscape where long strands of DNA spiral slowly inside a translucent cell. Under normal conditions, certain genes along these strands are quiet, folded away, inactive, waiting. But research by Katsiopo and colleagues, along with a massive meta-analysis published in PLOS Medicine by Julianne Holt-Lundstad and others in 2010, revealed something disturbing. This was not a small study. It covered 148 separate studies and over 308,000 participants. And the pattern that emerged was consistent. Chronic loneliness appears to alter the way your immune system functions at the level of gene transcription itself. The genes responsible for inflammation ramp up. They become more active, producing more inflammatory molecules, as if your body were preparing for a wound that never comes. At the same time, the genes responsible for antiviral defense dial down. The systems that protect you from viruses and other microscopic invaders grow quieter. Why would the body do this? The answer lies in evolutionary logic. For your ancient ancestors, being separated from the group meant an increased likelihood of physical attack. Predators, rival groups, accidents without anyone to help. The immune system, detecting sustained loneliness as sustained danger, shifts into a defensive posture. It prepares for wounds and bacterial infection because those were the most likely threats facing someone alone on the savannah. Your immune system does not know you are sitting safely in a heated apartment scrolling through your phone. It knows only that the alarm is ringing, and it prepares for the worst. Picture a translucent human silhouette standing in the middle of a dark, empty space. Inside the silhouette, small red particles multiply and drift outward, while small blue particles flicker and fade. Red is inflammation, climbing. Blue is antiviral defense, falling. This is the body under chronic loneliness, inflamed and underdefended simultaneously, fighting the wrong war on the wrong front. The mortality data is staggering. That same PLOS Medicine meta-analysis by Holt-Lundstad found that weak social connection was associated with a mortality risk increase with an odds ratio of 1.45. In plain language, people with poor social connections had roughly 1.5 times the risk of dying during the study period compared to those with stronger connections. The researchers noted this risk factor rivaled, and in some analyses exceeded, the risk associated with obesity. A study published in The Lancet in 2018 went further. It found that approximately a third of people in industrialized countries report feeling lonely, and this loneliness was correlated with a 26% increased risk of premature mortality. These are patterns emerging from hundreds of studies involving hundreds of thousands of people across multiple countries and decades. Now, a critical distinction. These are correlations, not proof that loneliness directly kills. It is possible that loneliness accompanies other factors that contribute to mortality. But the pattern is so consistent, so large, and so robust across different populations and research methods that dismissing it entirely would require ignoring an enormous body of evidence. Something about sustained disconnection tracks very closely with the body breaking down. Let those numbers sit for a moment. A third of people in the developed world reporting loneliness, a risk factor that rivals smoking and obesity, and almost no one treats it with the same urgency. Now we need the next clue. If loneliness is an alarm, and if the alarm changes your body when it rings too long, does it also change your mind? Does it change the way you see other people? Picture someone walking through a city at night. The buildings rise on either side, dark windows glowing faintly from within. Other people appear at intersections, in doorways, crossing bridges ahead. Watch what happens to the walker. Every time another person appears, something shifts. Attention snaps toward them. The gaze narrows. the body tenses slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if preparing for something unpleasant. Research by Cacioppo and colleagues, published in the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience in 2008, found that people experiencing loneliness tended to show heightened attention to social threats. Their perceptual systems appeared to be scanning for rejection, hostility, and exclusion with greater sensitivity than those of people who did not feel lonely. When shown images of social scenes, lonely individuals were faster to detect negative social cues. Their brains, it seemed, were on high alert. This is correlational data, meaning we cannot say definitively that loneliness causes this perceptual shift. But the association is striking, and it aligns with a broader pattern that Cacioppo described as hypervigilance to social threat. Think about what this means in everyday life. The lonelier you feel, the more your brain seems to filter social information through a lens of danger. A friend's neutral expression starts to look cold, maybe even hostile. A delayed text message stops being a sign that someone is busy and starts feeling like deliberate silence. An invitation that does not arrive becomes proof of your worthlessness. A colleague who forgets to say hello in the morning triggers a cascade of doubt that lasts the entire day. The alarm system, trying to protect you from further social harm, may actually make it harder to do the one thing that would help you most: reach out and connect. It is like a smoke detector that, after detecting one fire years ago, begins screaming at every shadow, every wisp of steam, every candle, until you disconnect it entirely and sit in the dark. And this leads to one of the most painful dynamics in the entire research literature. Pull the view upward now, far above the city, until you can see an entire social network laid out below. Think of it as a web of glowing points of light connected by thin, bright lines. Each point is a person, each line is a relationship. Near the center, the points are bright, densely connected, pulsing with activity. Messages flow back and forth, plans are made, support is offered and received. But watch the edges of the network. The points grow dimmer, the lines grow thinner. And at the very periphery, some points flicker alone, barely connected to the web at all. A study by Cacioppo and colleagues, published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology in 2009, tracked how loneliness moved through social networks over time. The findings described a troubling pattern. People who reported feeling lonely tended, over time, to drift toward the periphery of their networks. Their connections weakened. They participated less. They reached out less often, and were reached out to less often. But the finding that made this study particularly unsettling was what happened to the people around them. As lonely individuals drifted outward, the people they had been connected to also showed increased loneliness. The pattern suggested that disconnection does not stay contained. It appears to ripple outward through the network, subtly weakening bonds it never directly touches. One dimming light makes the lights around it a little less bright. Again, this is correlational. We cannot say with certainty that one person's loneliness caused another's, but the network data painted a picture that was hard to ignore. Loneliness did not just appear to affect the lonely person. It appeared to subtly restructure the social web around them, pulling threads loose in a pattern that moved from the edge inward. Watch one of those dim points at the edge of the network. Its connecting lines thin, flicker, and some go dark entirely. And the points it was connected to dim slightly in response, their own connections weakening by a fraction. A slow unraveling, almost invisible at any single moment, but devastating over years. This is where the story earns a pause. If you have felt yourself pulling away from people, not because you wanted to, but because something in you kept interpreting their signals as dangerous, as indifferent, as proof that you did not matter, then that pulling away was not your fault. It was the alarm system overshooting. The same system that evolved to push you toward the safety of the group was now pushing you away from it, because it had recalibrated to see threats everywhere. That is painful. It is deeply unfair. And recognizing it for what it is, a misfire of a protective system rather than a reflection of your worth, is the first step toward changing the pattern. Not the last step, the first. So we have an alarm that changes the body when it rings too long. We have a perceptual filter that makes threats look bigger and kindness look smaller. We have a network effect where disconnection appears to breed more disconnection in the people nearby. Now add the modern world and watch what happens. Picture a glowing screen floating in a dark room. On the screen, rows of tiny figures scroll past, each one performing happiness. One holds a trophy above their head. Another stands on a sunlit beach with perfect water behind them. Another is surrounded by a cluster of laughing friends, arms around each other, faces bright. The person watching the screen sits motionless, their own light dimming with each passing image. Researchers Nowland, Neka, and Cacioppo published a review in Perspectives on Psychological Science in 2018 that examined the relationship between internet use and loneliness. Their findings split cleanly in two. When people used digital communication to maintain and deepen existing relationships, to coordinate meeting a friend for coffee, to share something meaningful with someone they already knew and trusted, the technology was associated with reduced loneliness. It served as a bridge between face-to-face interactions, keeping the connection alive during the gaps. But when people used the internet as a substitute for face-to-face connection, scrolling through the curated lives of strangers instead of reaching out to someone real, the pattern reversed. That type of use was associated with increased loneliness. The screen became not a bridge, but a wall. The technology itself is not the villain here. The variable is how it is used and why. Picture two identical screens side by side. On the left screen, someone types a message and a moment later, someone else across the city lights up. A line of connection brightens between them. A plan is made. A meeting happens. On the right screen, someone scrolls endlessly through content created by strangers, watching lives they will never touch. And with each scroll, the small light inside them dims a little further. Same device, same glowing rectangle, opposite outcomes. And this is the particular cruelty of the digital age. Social media offers something that looks exactly like connection. It has all the visual markers, faces, conversations, reactions, shared experiences displayed in vivid detail. But for someone already caught in the hypervigilance of loneliness, that highlight reel of other people's curated perfection can become a constant source of unfavorable comparison. Everyone else seems to have what you are missing. Everyone else seems to belong effortlessly. The alarm rings louder. Cacioppo estimated that roughly 20% of Americans, around 60 million people, experience chronic loneliness. Across industrialized nations, the numbers are similar or higher. These are not hermits living in remote cabins. These are not people without contacts, without colleagues, without social media profiles listing hundreds or even thousands of connections. These are people surrounded by the entire architecture of social life who still feel the alarm ringing, who still look at their phones full of contacts and feel a gap that none of those contacts seem to fill. Which brings us back to Michael Phelps. Here was a man who could not walk through an airport without being recognized, whose face had been on magazine covers and cereal boxes, who had stood on podiums with gold medals around his neck while entire stadiums cheered his name. And yet the loneliness he described after the Olympics was not mild discomfort. It was a crisis that drove him toward depression so severe he questioned whether life was worth continuing. If loneliness were simply about being alone, Phelps would never have experienced it. He was never alone. But the connections he had, the public adoration, the team camaraderie, the media attention, did not match what his brain was actually searching for. The alarm did not care about fame. It did not care about crowds. It was measuring something else, something deeper, and finding it insufficient. And now we have enough evidence to make the reveal. The reason you can feel lonely when you are not alone is that loneliness was never about the presence of people. It was about the absence of a specific kind of connection. Cacioppo and Patrick's central finding, the one that reframes everything we have discussed, is that loneliness tracks the gap between the social connection you need and the social connection you perceive yourself to have. Not the connection you actually have in some objective sense, the connection you perceive. Two people can have identical social lives, the same number of friends, the same frequency of interaction, and one can feel deeply lonely while the other feels perfectly satisfied. Because the measurement is not external, it is internal. It is happening inside the brain, filtered through years of experience, shaped by the hypervigilance we discussed, colored by every rejection and every moment of belonging that came before. Imagine someone standing in a room made of transparent walls. On the other side of every wall, there are people, dozens of them. They are visible, they are close, some of them are even reaching toward the walls. But the walls do not open. The person can see the crowd, and the crowd can see the person, and yet no real signal passes through. No warmth, no understanding, no sense of being truly known. That transparent wall is perception. It is built from hypervigilance to social threats, from past rejections that trained the brain to expect more rejection around every corner, from a culture that offers endless, shallow contact and almost no guidance on how to build depth. The wall is not imaginary. It has real neural correlates, real immunological consequences, real effects on how you see every face and interpret every silence. But it is also not permanent. It is a setting that was adjusted by experience, and settings that were adjusted by experience can be adjusted again. The alarm of loneliness was never telling you that you are broken. It was never telling you that you are unlovable or fundamentally deficient in some way that cannot be repaired. It was telling you that the kind of connection you currently have is not the kind of connection you need. That is a different message entirely. Quantity cannot solve this. 10 more acquaintances will not quiet the alarm. Another 100 followers will not fill the gap. A busier social calendar, packed with small talk and surface-level pleasantries, will not touch the place where the signal is coming from. What the research points toward, consistently, across decades and hundreds of thousands of participants, is that the signal quiets when the connection is genuinely mutual, genuinely safe, and genuinely felt. Not performed, not displayed for an audience, not counted and compared. Felt, in the body, in the nervous system, in the ancient parts of the brain that have been keeping score since before your species had a name. Rise high above the city one last time. The web of social connections stretches out below, millions of points of light, billions of connecting lines. Most of the lines are thin, decorative, carrying almost no signal. They are the colleague you nod to in the hallway, the neighbor whose name you have forgotten twice. These lines exist, but they do not feed the system that is hungry. But here and there, between 2 points of light, a line glows thick and warm. Those lines are rare. They are not easy to build. They require something the modern world is not designed to give you. Time, first of all. Real time, not scheduled time, not efficient time, but the slow, unstructured time where two people can sit together long enough for the masks to come off. Vulnerability, second. The willingness to say something true rather than something safe. And third, reciprocity. The experience of being known and knowing someone else in return, not as an audience member, but as a participant. And the deepest irony of loneliness is this: the alarm that evolved to push you toward connection can, when it rings too long and too loud, convince you that connection is exactly what will hurt you most. The hypervigilance makes every social interaction feel risky. The perceptual filter makes neutral faces look cold. The network drift pulls you to the edges, where there are fewer chances to practice connection at all. The system designed to save you becomes the system that keeps you locked inside the room with transparent walls, watching the world move on the other side. Recognizing this pattern, seeing the alarm for what it is, understanding that the walls are built from perception and not from truth, is not a cure. It is not a magic phrase that dissolves years of reinforced caution overnight. But it is the difference between standing in that room believing the walls are solid stone, immovable, permanent, part of who you are, and standing in that room realizing they are made of something that was constructed slowly, one experience at a time, and can be deconstructed the same way. With patience, with help, with the courage to test whether the next person who appears on the other side of the wall might, if you let them, actually be reaching for you. The loneliness you feel is not evidence that you are unlovable. It is evidence that you are a social creature whose ancient wiring is still working, still scanning, still hoping for the kind of connection that kept your ancestors alive. The signal is not the problem. What you do with the signal, whether you let it push you toward one real, mutual, vulnerable connection, or whether you let it pull you deeper into the room with transparent walls, is the only question that matters. And the fact that you are here, listening to this, thinking about this, means the signal is still active, which means the system has not given up on you, even if, for a while, you gave up on it.